Do you want to get started in this hobby but aren't sure which tools to use? Have you just started but don't know where to find each material? Well, don't worry, because absolutely all crafters were beginners at some point. Today I'm going to tell you what tools and materials you need to get started and where to find them. I will also talk about the properties of materials, how to work with them, and what projects or purpose each one is best suited for. And finally, I will tell you about which paints and glues I use. Are you ready? So let's get started! Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Sahak, which is not obviously my real name, but my Will Wars nickname from many years ago. I've decided to make this video because some people ask me about this topic. And even though there's a lot of content out there, I think I can offer my personal take on the subject and summarize the essentials in one video. We will divide the explanation in 4 sections: building, materials, glue, and paint. In the video description, I will leave you links for the most of the items I talk about. These are affiliate links, which means that if you purchase something, I will receive a personal at no additional cost for you. This helps me continue running the channel and to afford the materials and tools I used in the videos. Okay, let's talk about materials. I have to say that you can achieve great results using very different materials. And while I might have an opinion or a preference, that doesn't mean it's the right one. I recommend experimenting with what you have on hand and seeing what works best for each project. XPS foam is one of the quintessential materials in the world of terrain crafting. It's easy to cut, durable, and its surface has memory, which allows you to add texture using various methods. It's also extremely lightweight, making the pieces made from this material easy to transport. Depending on where you live, you may find different types, and their characteristics and price may vary. I live in Spain, and I always buy blue insulation foam. It comes in large sheets of 120 centimeters long and 60 centimeters wide. I buy it from stores specialized in construction materials, and it's very economical, costing less than 4 euros per sheet. You can also find smaller pieces of other types of foam on Amazon. These pieces are more manageable and easier to work with, but the price increases considerably. To cut this material, it's highly recommended to use a hot wire cutter, but a knife with a sharp blade will work just as well if you don't have this tool. Cardboard is a classic. It's extremely cheap since it's very easy to get corrugated cardboard boxes from products we've bought. You can also ask for them in stores. They will likely have no problem giving you some since they have to dispose of them constantly. Cardboard is also lightweight, easy to cut with a knife or scissors, and quite durable. It can be easily folded along the grain of the interior corrugation, but it's challenging to do so in the opposite direction. A small drawback is that you always have to hide the exposed interior parts. In the houses video you're watching, for example, I had to use coffee stirrers to conceal them. This material is perfect for beginners because, as its price is almost zero, it's great for experimenting. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes and have to throw a piece away. This way, if you're new, you can overcome the fear of starting. Additionally, almost any glue will work well, resulting in strong and durable bonds. Cardstock is another great ally in a crafter's workshop. Much thinner and more flexible than cardboard, it has a wide variety of uses. It's very easy to cut with a scissors or a blade, can be folded or curved, and can be glued with almost any type of adhesive. Personally, I use it for roof bases, as in the case of the chart you're seeing. I also use it for details on doors, to add texture to walls, or for example to make sails for ships. It's also a good material for printing templates, as it passes through a printer easily if you have it in sheets. Foam core is another great material. You can get it from the dollar store, and it's extremely useful for buildings and structures. Foam core consists of a thin sheet of foam covered with paper on both sides. It is a sturdy material but really easy to cut and handle. Unlike cardboard, you don't have to worry about the edges, so you can achieve a great finish much more easily. However, its price is higher, and I must say that where I live, foam core is more expensive than XPS foam. Even so, it is a great material, and I have used it many times, for example in the church, where all the walls are made with this material as a base. Balsa wood is another really interesting material to consider. Despite being wood, it's so soft that it can be cut with a knife and textured with a pencil. For me, it is ideal for making doors or small wooden constructions like towers, bridges, or cranes. It's generally sold in small sheets that can be found in some dollar stores or craft stores. Ice cream sticks, coffee sticks, and toothpicks are ideal to combine with balsa wood and are very useful and versatile. You can find them in dollar stores or supermarkets, and they are extremely cheap. They can be easily cut with a knife, a small saw, or wire cutters. They can be used to recreate beams, wooden planks, or poles. Specifically, toothpicks are really useful as structural elements in joints between XP spawn pieces. Every crafter should have a scrap box. There, we store all the small pieces and scraps of material that we have left over but may be useful at some point. One of the things I have the most are small vests for making bracelets in various shapes and sizes. They are really useful for making all kinds of things, from door handlers to magic potions, door hinges, or other details. Let your imagination run wild. I have other pieces like gears, ladders, or anything else that I found and think I might use in the future. You can find all these things at the dollar store or on Amazon. I will leave some links to products that might interest you. I also always keep adhesive plastic jewels from the dollar store on hand. I have them in many shapes and sizes. They don't just have to simulate a jewel or a crystal. They can also be painted to look like rivets as seen on the statue and the ship shown in the video. Another important element to consider are threads, ropes, and chains. I recommend having various cords to imitate ropes. You can also recycle an old pendant and use its chain. There are many possibilities for these elements, so it's always good to have them on hand. A trick for making ropes is to use cord and harden it with PVA glue. This way it will become rigid and easy to paint. Sand is a very important material if you're making terrain. It can be used for texturing as it's shown in the video of the houses I made, to add detail to a base or to fill gaps between bricks. I recommend having several grain sizes separately. You can buy sand, but it's easier to go to the beach or the mountains and collect some. Very important, if you collect sand from nature, bake it for at least an hour, to ensure you kill any microorganism or bacteria that might be present. Putty or filler is another great material for some types of construction. It will help you cover imperfections between foam joints or fill in masonry, but it's also a great texturizer. You can apply it directly to the foam and shape it with a brush. You can find different types of putty in hardware stores, dollar stores, or Amazon. Finally, let's talk about products for flocking and grass. There are different types on the market. Personally, I use static grass and sponge foliage in various colors. Other easy-to-get options include using dry berry seal or other species from the supermarket. For me, the best approach is to use different types along with PVA glue to get a varied and more realistic mix. Now let's move on to tools. There are countless tools for almost any use you can imagine. However, some of them are absolutely essential for this hobby. While others can be very interesting, they might be not worth if you're just starting out. Let's take a look. The first tool we must mention is undoubtedly the utility knife. Without a cutting tool, we won't get far, and this is the most versatile for this hobby. With this, you can cut foam without needing a hot wire cutter, balsa wood, cardboard, foam core, and many other materials. It's very important to always use sharp blades to make clean cuts. Always cut away from your hands to avoid potential accidents. If you need more precise cuts, a knife might be not the best choice. For that, there are modeling blades. They are usually interchangeable, very sharp, and ideal for particularly delicate work. This tool isn't 100% necessary, but it can be very useful, especially if you work with miniatures. If you need to cut wood, a small saw can be very handy. I use it to cut dowels or popsicle sticks. It's a very useful tool, but you can save money by using Jenga pieces instead of cutting dowels to size if you want to make furniture. If you need long beams, you can buy pre-cut pieces or use another material. We've talked about cutting tools, but all these cuts need to be made somewhere. Nothing is better than a cutting mat. This, to me, is a must for crafting. It will protect your table and provide a nice surface for your blades. Additionally, these mats are marked with measurements, which will help a lot when marking pieces to cut. Another useful item to have is a small meter box. It helps make straight cuts or perfect 45-degree angle cuts. There are small aluminum models that allow you to use both a utility knife and a saw. Although the cutting mats allows you to measure, you will still need a roller. This will not only help you take measurements but also making cuts. For this reason, it must be metal, as a plastic one could get sliced when making passes with the blade. This is, in my opinion, another essential in crafter's workshop. Pliers are also another very useful tool. I have a small set placed in this holder I made with some Jenga pieces. It's useful to have different types, as there are cutting pliers, holding pliers, etc. The different shapes will be useful for different tasks. Cutting pliers are especially useful for cutting coffee sticks, separating miniatures from plastic sprues, cutting toothpicks, wires, etc. Holding pliers will be helpful on many occasions for placing or gluing small pieces, bending wires or clips, or shaping a malleable material. Tweezers are another essential tool. In this hobby, you work with very small pieces and your fingers aren't precise at all. This tool will increase your precision when working with small beds, placing details in your constructions, or another tasks. When you cut things, especially wood, the cuts are often not entirely clean. At those times, you will need to sand. I have those small files, but you can also use sandpaper. Sometimes you can use them for other purposes, like making notches in pieces of wood or foam or enlarging holes. It's another very useful tool. I prefer to buy a small set of precision files, but even a piece of sandpaper in your workshop will be enough. When working with miniatures, it's very important to texture the materials. This mainly applies to foam or foam core if you remove the paper layer, but also to balsa wood and sticks. Every crafter has their preferences. You will often see me using a foil board or a stone. However, there are other tools like an aluminum bristle brush to simulate weird grain or texture rollers which you can buy in many different patterns. For cutting foam with precision and speed, nothing beats a hot wire cutter. If you are just starting out, it's not 100% necessary, but for me it was a game changer, as it allows you to do many things. In my case, I have a Proxxon, which is the most widely used tool and from what I understand also the highest quality one. Additionally, I use various jigs from shifting lands, which make my life much easier. The great thing about a cutter of this type is that since it cuts by heat, the pieces will be completely clean with a spectacular finish. But as I said, if you are new, start with a knife, and after completing several projects you can consider whether you want to level up. Alright, another essential. So far, everything we've mentioned has been geared toward building, but you will also need tools for painting. You will need brushes of various types, from large brushes for priming and painting large surfaces to small brushes for detailing. If you watch more videos from this channel or other fellow crafters, you will see that the dry brush technique is often used. However, this technique is harsh on brushes, so never use new brushes for it. Instead, use brushes that are a bit old or, as I do, makeup brushes. These brushes are very cheap and perfect for using with this technique. Another important point to consider is glue. The strength of the joints we will make will directly impact the durability of our pieces. So let's see what options we have. Let's quickly talk about the types of glue I use. For strong bonds between porous materials, I always go for PVA glue. This glue works especially well with wood, cardboard and all their derivatives. It also takes quite a while to dry, but once it does, the bonds are extremely strong. The good part is that you will have plenty of time to work with. It's very economical and has a multitude of uses. For example, besides gluing, it can be used to coat foam and make it more resistant. This will also allow you to spray paint it without melting the foam. Next we have hot glue. These small sticks of thermoplastic adhesive that melt with the heat of the gun and harden in a few seconds. This glue dries very quickly, giving little time to work, but this way you avoid the tedious waiting times. However, the bonds are not usually very strong. A good technique is to combine this with PVA glue, using hot glue as a temporary bond while the other glue dries. Generally, it's economical, and I highly recommend having a hot glue gun in your workshop. Finally, let's talk about super glue. This glue is extremely strong, and unlike PVA glue, is quite toxic, so be careful not to inhale its fumes. This glue is great for bonding metal or plastic parts, both of which are non-porous materials. Super glue dries very quickly, so there is little time to work with it, and I recommend it for very specific tasks that require precision and very little product. And finally, let's talk about paint. Although this is the last point, it doesn't mean it's any less important, as the paint job is what brings everything we build to life. A bad quality paint may not adhere correctly to the material we are using, may not provide enough coverage or even damage our pieces. I will show you what I use and how I do it. Personally, I almost exclusively use acrylic paints. These paints are water soluble and have a very low toxicity level, so they emit very few fumes. They have good coverage on most materials, though it's important to differentiate between specialized model paints and regular acrylics. For model paints I use Vallejo, although other well-known brands include Citadel and Army Painter. These paints adhere much better to plastic materials and are generally of a higher quality. However, their price is much higher and they come in very small bottles, which isn't ideal for painting terrain. That's why I use other brands. With a good primer they will adhere to anything without issues. I use Americana a lot, but I tried others like Duncan or Palmer and they work just as well. Another thing I use a lot are ink washes. This can be bought, but I always make my own. Just water down some paint and you're good to go. Generally, a ratio of 1 part paint to between 5 and 10 parts water is fine, depending on how much coverage you want.
I usually make them on the fly, except for black, which I prepare in larger quantities since I use it a lot. If you want the ink to penetrate more into the recesses, just add a little dish soap to the mix, but make sure to add no more than a drop in a good amount of ink, or it will foam when you apply it. Finally, I will mention spray paint. This kind of paint contains components that melt foam, so be careful with that and apply a good coat of PVA glue beforehand to prevent it. Anyway, I don't use it for that, but rather to prime miniatures on small plastic or metal objects that generally don't paint well with acrylic paint. Use gloves and a mask with this type of paint, and always apply it outdoors or in well-ventilated areas, as it is a highly toxic product.
So, to summarize, these are the materials and tools that I use. I believe this guide is quite comprehensive and can be very useful to those starting out in this hobby. If any of you notice that I've missed something and want to share your own experience, please leave a comment down below so we all can learn from each other. And if you're a beginner and have any questions, I will be happy to help. That said, this is the first video of this type and I hope it's helpful. If it gets a good response, I might make more. In my meantime, I will leave you with my very first video here. It is the simplest build I've done on the channel, and I recommend it if you're looking for a first project but can't decide. And that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this guide and see you in the next video.